Welcome to the Monster in My Head show, a podcast where we talk to real people about the real issues and insecurities many of us face, as well as unique ways to overcome them. My name is Bree, and I am so stoked because today I have my wonderful friend and collaborator, Jules from Jules The Howl. Welcome, Jules.
Woo! What's up, girl? How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited that you're here. I'm excited that we're going to be talking about something that I think we're both really passionate about, as well as a very exciting event. So before we get started, today we're going to be talking about what it looks like to carve your own path. Obviously, we're both artists. We're going to talk a lot about what that means artistically. But I did want to mention before we start what inspired this podcast. So
awesome.
We are doing an event on July 19th called Women Rock LA. Jules, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of this?
Hell yeah. Okay, so we are doing Women Rock LA. It is the first of this iteration of shows, and it is 4 female-fronted bands, plus a female DJ, plus a female comedian who's also emceeing the whole night. It's going to be a great, great night celebrating women in rock music. As much as there have been some strides in that, especially in the last little bit here, there's always room for more. There's room for a lot more, actually, and we're trying to really carve a niche for rising female rock talent in LA. So that's kind of what we're doing it for. We've invited, of course, all of our fans and our friends and family, but we also have a lot of industry people coming as well. So it's going to be a great opportunity to really hopefully make some new connections and get some new fans. Just have a great old time. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be super fun. I'm really excited. And so if you do want to get tickets for that, if you're listening, we will have the link in the bio or in the description. It is a free event at Lucky Strike Hollywood. It starts at 8 p.m. and it goes till 12. Like Jules said, we're going to have like a ton of entertainment there. So it's going to be an amazing night and you're not going to want to miss it. So
hell yeah.
Now that we got that out of the way, I do want to talk a little bit about kind of what our topic for today is. So the reason why I wanted to talk about carving your own path is because that's really what we're doing with this concert, right? We're kind of creating an opportunity for ourselves. The industry didn't give it to us. Nobody else gave it to us. We're like, we're going to make this ourselves. So the first question I want to ask about kind of carving your own path. So for you, as an artist, we've been told that in order to be successful, we have to like follow this certain path. Specifically, recently it's been social media. Before it was getting a label, all this different stuff. But I think we are seeing now more and more that people are taking different paths. So when did you kind of decide that you wanted to do things differently, carve your own path? And what does that look like for you?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, in terms of like, when did I kind of get started with it all? I was actually originally going to be an actor.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, fun fact. I had studied abroad at a London acting conservatory. I got a major in theater. I had started auditioning for grad programs. I was very much on track to go the theater route, move to New York, the whole 9 yards. And during those audition rounds, I was in New York and I bombed. So I was like, fuck this shit. And I'm literally wandering around New York and kind of like contemplating my future at like 21. And I stumbled into a music store and I just sat down and started playing the piano, and I could literally feel like all of the stress and anxiety and the chaos of my mind just kind of leaving my body through my fingers. And it was a very kind of like cathartic spiritual experience. I kind of thought to myself, okay, if this isn't a sign from like God and the universe that I'm meant to do something different than what I thought, then I don't know what is. So I decided to kind of, if you will, carve my own path in music that way. Because I started halfway through my senior year, I completely revamped my entire trajectory, being like, okay, so JK, I'm gonna do music. And everybody was like, wait, what? Why? What are you talking about? And I was like, no, I got it. I promise. And I went to school at Boston College, which is not really known for their music. And I've only heard of a couple of bands really come out of there. One is still touring the US, but anyway. And so there wasn't really a scene for me to get into in Boston. So I was like, well, I'm from Chicago. Let's go back to Chicago and see what happens. And I really did kind of hit the ground running and kind of carved my own way in that scene, which was very heavy with like kids who went to college in Chicago or in Illinois. And I knew nobody. I knew no one. And I was just like, just kind of dove head in. I was like, all right, fuck it, here we go. Like, if I want to make this happen, we got to do it. And so I kind of just kept trying to find my own way from there. And that was in like 2015. And so that was when, social media had already broken out, sure, but I don't think it had quite reached the saturation levels that it is now, for sure. And it was definitely, the message was definitely, this is the heyday for indie artists. You know, this is like the chance, like no more gatekeepers, you know, nothing like that. I kept trying to kind of follow the steps, if you will, what I thought were the steps, whether it was like some marketing guru telling me what to do, or whether it was some podcast or conference or whatever. And I realized that with music, and when you're trying to be an artist, there literally is no path. It's just a bunch of this. It's like a fucking pinball machine. Okay. Like you're trying to launch the ball, get to the hole, but you end up going like this and around by like that, like that. So I was kind of like, well, I need to carve my own path really in this scenario, because I feel like I didn't really have a choice. I think also too, with when you're an artist and you're trying to kind of figure out your voice and your branding and like, okay, what kind of music are you trying to do? What are you trying to say? Like, you know, what are you doing effectively? I think that requires so much kind of introspection to then figure out, okay, how exactly am I going to navigate, you know, this path for myself? Want to be a touring successful musician, but I also want to be a mom. And I often have to kind of juggle like, okay, where am I at with a timeline in my life? Does it feel right to lean more into one versus the other? Like I'm constantly reevaluating that. And it's such a struggle because like, I don't see a lot of role models really for me of women who like are either at the indie level and have children and are financially supporting themselves like through music or mostly through music. Or I don't see a lot of role models who are women who had kids like during or before they you know, hit it big, right? So I'm kind of trying to figure out, okay, what does my path look like going forward in terms of how do I, you know, achieve my fulfillment in what I believe I'm meant to do artistically and professionally versus personally and, you know, maternally. So
Yeah.
that was a very long answer. I tried to kind of cover the whole gamut, but
I love it. I love it. No, thank you. Thank you for that answer. There's a lot of really good stuff there. I think that, you know, first talking about the way that you got into it, absolutely, you carving your own path. You were like, I love that you didn't stick with something that wasn't giving you fulfillment, because it would have been a lot easier to stick with that and be like, well, I've been working this whole time towards that. Like I have to keep doing that. But then I feel like you'd have resentment. I know for myself, like I started in the music industry when I was 15 and I was doing it for a long time, got burned out, did a bunch of other things, kept trying to run away from music. So I was like, I can't do this. This is too hard. This is too painful. I had a lot of trauma attached to it. But then it got to a point where I was like, this truly is who I am. Like this is legitimately what I do and who I am. And so what does it look like to just create our own path and our own destiny? And it doesn't have to look like anybody else. So even though you don't have a role model in what you're saying, like you could be that person that could be a role model to other people. And I really do that. The topic of motherhood in this industry, I think, is a really difficult one. I personally don't want to have kids, but I really do feel for women who have those desires of just like, you want, like, we're shown that motherhood looks a very certain way. And a lot of times like staying home with your kids and like all, you know, which is totally fine if that's what you want to do. But that really does go to war with kind of what it looks like to be an artist. But that's something that's interesting though, is that I think what it means to be an artist is really changing. I don't know if you've noticed that too, but like, I think before, being an artist meant you had to be on the road 90% of the time. But now it's like, there are so many artists who are running businesses, who are doing other creative things, who are doing all these different things where they are defining what it looks like to be an artist for themselves. And that's, I think, for me personally, what I'm kind of trying to discover of like, what does that look like for me? Do I need to be on the road all the time? I want to be sometimes, but can I use my business acumen in other ways? Like, you know, so have you noticed those changes in the industry as time has gone on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the oversaturation of the market caused by social media has changed the way that indie artists find ways to stand out, if you will.
That is true.
So like, what does that look like? Okay, do I have to, and I think the other sort of issue with it is that it's changed more quickly, like from each way, if that makes sense. Like first it was like, oh, we'll just hit X many Instagram followers and you're done. Actually, no, like a second later, it's actually placate the algorithm this way. Actually, a second later, it's go viral. Okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
how do I go viral? What does that mean? What does that look like? Like, da 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 da. How do I
Mm-hmm.
capitalize on that?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so but at the same time, I've also heard rumblings of people like in the industry who are, higher up, whatever, where evidently, and I think this remains to be seen, but evidently they're not really looking for the viral catch anymore, because what happens is like, I literally like I heard about this story where there was this kid who, 15 seconds of his song blew up, and he booked a concert at like the Greek, okay, which he really had no business doing because he had never performed before. And he literally he did a set fine, but the audience, not only did they only want to hear the song that went viral, but they only knew that 15 seconds of
I've
that
heard
song.
that so often.
Right,
I've heard that
right.
so often. Yeah.
Right. And so then you say to yourself, okay, well, that was a lot of money that we just poured into, just from their side, right? From the label side. So we just poured a lot of money into a guy who had 15 seconds, boom, done. And I think what they're forgetting is the longevity that is
100%.
required.
100%.
And, and so now I think they're kind of going back to a strategy of like, okay, maybe we want to find someone who's already got the spark, and we just kind of need to fan the flame, basically.
Dude,
So,
that seriously, I think, is exactly what the future is. I know for myself, like when we're talking about covering on path, for a long time I was getting really stressed about like, okay, I gotta make social media content, I gotta do the fucking
right.
TikTok dances, I gotta blah blah blah. But like the idea of that made me want to die. And
Oh,
so I was
absolutely.
like, how do I like not follow what everyone else is doing and do the thing that feels authentic to me, and to me that is creating longevity by pouring ourselves into our art, allowing people to get us to know us in our art and having a message that matters. And I know for myself, like with this project that I did with Playing with Power, it was all about my struggles with mental health, and it's like I
Mm-hmm.
know other people experience this. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
released Monster in My Head, and which is a song that I did, a music video I did, and it
Mm-hmm.
has like 30,000 views, which to some people is not
Woo!
a lot, but that's a lot to me. And their comments are like, I really relate to this. I feel this. I needed to hear this today. And like, I do truly believe that if we as artists kind of take back our own power and be like,
Mm-hmm.
we are going to create things that make us happy, that hopefully will impact people in a positive way, like that is going to create the longevity that I think, yeah, TikTok stars are just not, at least a lot of them are not going to have.
Right. Right. No, and I think that's kind of the thing too that I know you and I have talked about like separately, which is that like
Mm-hmm.
how do we on the one hand maintain the social media presence
Mm-hmm.
without kind of falling into the traps or the trends or whatever, because they change so quickly,
Mm-hmm.
while also, being aware of those tools and aware of those trends, and maybe like sort of integrating them into the content that we already feel makes us happy,
Right, right, totally. It's
like
not like saying like I'm never going to do social media, but it's like how do you
no.
do it sustainably for yourself that's authentic to who you are and what you want, you know?
Right. I think there's ways to do it. I think there's ways to kind of frame your voice within
Mm-hmm.
the algorithm and the trends, but without losing it, right?
Yeah.
And some of the I could go on for that because I think that there's a whole thing. But at the end of the day, like you have to make content that you're proud of, and you have to
Yeah.
make content that you enjoy creating, because
You
if
have to
you
make
don't, then who
art that you're
cares?
proud of too.
Right.
Like you stuff
Right.
that you're. I've heard people say how there are songwriters who make careers out of analyzing trends and making music that
Oh
fits
yeah.
those trends. Here's the
Mm-hmm.
thing though, AI is doing that now. So like, why the
Right.
fuck are
I
you gonna
mean,
do that? If literally computers can do it so much faster than you, but what computers can't do is have a life story that you write from, so it's like that is not, to me, that's not a sustainable model, even though that's a model that a lot of people have made a lot of money doing, but I think it's
I
going away.
I'm I know that a lot of people AI when it comes to the power and influence of it, and it's kind of taking over the
Mm-hmm.
industry. And I do think that there is some merit to that, for especially the songwriter's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, the amount of like power, like water power, that it takes to generate the I forget what all the terms are called, but like the amount of water power that it takes to actually generate the machines that then like allow it to like crunch the data to then spit out, this music and whatnot, it's a lot. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that we're at a point yet where we need to be like worried about it completely taking over songwriters. Now,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, even when AI becomes at a point where it can be
Mm-hmm.
writing hit songs or whatever, like I think that is why we have to continue to lean into our story, because that is something AI will never have. It's never going to have a story. It's never going to have a perspective on life. And like, I truly do think that that's where artistry is going now, where it's like social media was where it opened up to where people wanted to learn more about the artist's everyday life.
Right.
But I do think that now with AI, you know, creating all this garbage, truly so much garbage, people are going to want to lean even more into authenticity of like, but no, who are you as an artist and as a person? What do you stand for? In a world where it feels like no one stands for anything anymore, what do you stand for? And I think for me, that's kind of the thing that I'm really trying to lean into with my art is like, here's my message. Here's what I stand for. Here's how I want to use my voice. And then like, just hope that that will reach the right people. Will it? I have no fucking idea, but at least I can try.
Exactly. At least I'll know that I tried.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's like really all that we can do with part of this. I will say though, I think one of the things that AI won't be able to touch is live performing.
Oh yeah, there's no way. No one wants to see a at least I don't want to see a holograph.
I don't want to see a holograph.
Oh my god, terrifying.
I don't want to see. I don't need to see a holograph. You know, I don't need to see like. I don't need to pay all kinds of money to see a presentation. Like you pay money to hear the story from the person, right? To see the performance, you know? So I think that there's that aspect that it won't take away from. And I think too, to your point, it's like, I think that you're right. I think that there's a lot that we're going to be leaning into in terms of like authenticity, in terms of like, okay, like what is making you human versus what is making you AI? You know what I mean?
100%.
So
100%. I think it's really important. I want to go back to what we were talking about with timeline, because one of the questions I have here is, how have you been affected by the perceived timeline that society puts on us, especially as women, in regards to your artistry? I know you spoke about that a little bit when it comes to wanting to be a mom, but like, I'd love to hear more details about how does that feel for you? And what are the kind of ways mentally you're working through that in order to overcome that?
My God. I mean, literally my timeline of like success and where I thought I was going to be when like completely like changed it changed. And like literally I started out at 22. I thought I was going to be famous by 25. And that's just like, who put this idea in my mind? Where are they? What's going on here? So like, I think, I mean, that was a huge like, oh, okay, well, that's not happening, you know? And I think also too, like, honestly, like figuring out like the timeline of like my personal life and how it aligned with, complemented, or perhaps differentiated from my professional timeline. So like, for example, you know, I was fortunate that I met my husband at 22 as well. 22 was a big year for me. Big year, evidently. Big year. And I honestly, like, he and I would have been married much sooner than we did get married. But I wanted to wait. I wanted to be like, no. Let me make sure that I am super successful and financially stable with my music career, and then we can get married. And I'm like getting into my 20s and I'm just like, this isn't really happening at the pace that I want it to. So let's just put a pause on that, and you and I will do what we want to do and then kind of figure it out from there. And so I think kind of like, I think for me, you know, I'm very much like an oriented, like an A. I've always been like type A when it comes to like, you know,
girl, same. That's why we get along so well.
I know, girl, I know. Very goal oriented, very future oriented. Yep. Like, what's your 30-day plan? What's your 1-year plan? What's your 5-year plan? And honestly, I cannot operate in that anymore. Because,
oh my God, literally same.
Yeah, it causes mental breakdowns.
It causes legitimately mental breakdowns. It's absolutely the worst.
Legitimately. Like at 25, I had like a fucking mental breakdown. I was just like, and I'm like, bitch, and then I meet a girl. Literally, like months ago, I met a girl who was like 25, and she's like, I don't know what I'm doing with my musical career. And I'm like, how old are you? She goes, I'm 25. I'm like, oh, my sweet child, shut the fuck up. And again, and it's like, and I hate when people do that, but like, I mean, I did not say that to her, but in my mind, I was like, honey, you're fine. But it's like, there is this like crazy ass timeline placed on, because you know what it is? And honestly, okay, did you watch The Golden Bachelor?
No, but I've heard much about it.
Okay, I swear this is related. You're like, where's this? You're like, where's this bitch going with this?
I love it.
No, there was a contestant. Because okay, The Golden Bachelor, For those of you who don't know, basically it's The Bachelor, but they are people like after 50, right? 50, 60,
Cool
even 70
concept.
plus.
I thought that was a really cool concept.
Yeah, I agree. And that was why I watched it, because I wanted to kind of see socially what the difference was.
Yeah.
And what I loved was that these women, they had actually lived a life, right? They had had a career, or they had had kids, a husband, no husband. Like, they had lived a life, and they were a lot more like, this is who I am. But one of the things that, like, I can't even get it out of my head, and I'm paraphrasing it, but there was a woman on the show, and I think she was like 60, and she was beautiful, and she was like 60. And she goes, the thing is, women are constantly defined by their beauty for their value. Like how young and beautiful you are equals your value in society. And when you reach a certain age, and when you have a little bit more wrinkles, then your value and your voice starts to go down dramatically in society. And I think that's why, there's so many anti-aging products, like youthful this, youthful that, working out, staying in shape, because it's like, at the end of the day, we're so afraid of not mattering that we place so much pressure on like what we look like, and what we, how old we are. And really, I do feel at the same time that the definitions of what is old are changing, and it's mattering less for women, which thank God.
Yeah.
But it does still matter, and especially if you do want to have children. If you don't, Godspeed, power to you. You ain't got nothing to worry about. You go forth and prosper. But, which, I'm not a Star Trek fan. I just really like that phrase. So I think there's that aspect, but like at the same time, like there's clearly this pressure on our generation, particularly women, to like have it together by certain like 5-year periods. Like, okay, by 25, like this in your career. By 30, this.
So unrealistic for so many people. And also, I think what happens a lot of times is people expect everyone to know what they want to do with their life immediately.
Oh,
like,
yes.
And so there's a lot of like studies that show that that people who specialize in certain areas, they tend to do really well in the beginning, and then sometimes that success can go down because they only do one thing. But
that's the problem.
People who do a lot of different kinds of things, who explore a lot of different options, tend to be overall more successful in their lives, because they have a unique set of skills, a unique combination of skills. But yeah, there is definitely this pressure to like, you should have shit figured out by the time you're 25. But then as you get older, you look back and you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, 25 is so young. I'm 28, about to turn 29, and I'm like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. But I am knowing more about who I am and what I want. And like, that's enough, and that's okay,
But see, then by comparison, and again, because this is why I like, the age and the timeline, I think it's not so much, I think, dependent upon the number of your age. I think it's more dependent upon like the amount of wisdom and life experience that you've gotten, and the amount of maturity that you've allowed yourself to go through. And what I mean by that is like, I know plenty of 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds who do not at all have their life together.
Yeah, 100%.
And there's a lot of stunted individuals in LA. Like,
ma'am.
A lot of people who should have grown up about 30, 40 years ago and did not. So there's a lot of that. And then, but then simultaneously, there are 22, 23-year-old young women who I know, and I'm like astounded by their grace and their sense of self and their maturity. And are they still figuring out life? Of course. But like, I'm still just like, okay, girl, I see you. Or like, okay, bro, like, all right, I see you, So like, I think in that sense, perhaps the timelines are changing in terms of like, but I mean, I think that there's also a little bit more of a freedom to kind of carve your own path than there was even 10 years ago.
We have more tools to do it, I think, which is really nice. So yeah, it's weird. It's like this onset of expectation because we have so many people to compare ourselves to, while at the same time also having the freedom to truly do kind of whatever we want because the tools that are at our disposal. But that does kind of create a plethora of options that can be kind of paralyzing sometimes, where it's just like, I know for myself, of being like, oh my God, I can do lots of different things, but like, what do I actually want to do? And actually, there's this really good quote by Steve Jobs, who was kind of an asshole, but he actually had some really good quotes.
That's the thing with that guy, man. That's the thing. Like he gave an amazing commencement speech. Yeah, but he was also a fucking asshole.
Like a fucking prick. But like he had a good quote. He said, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow know what you truly want to become. And I actually really relate to that, because like legit, when I tell you that I've tried quitting music like 10 times, like full on, like I will never do this again. I'm so done. And then, but my heart has always been like, you have to, like, this is who you are. And so kind of like what you were saying, I had to truly dismantle what I thought my life should be by a certain timeline in order to just keep doing this. Like I definitely had like, I'm going to be playing stadiums by the time I'm whatever age, 17 years old. And then as I got older, I was like, okay, well, if this is going to be sustainable for me, I have to completely take apart this idea of what I think my life is going to be and allow it to be whatever it's going to be, based on me just fully living in like the path that I'm creating for myself and following the passion that I have. And it's like, hopefully that works. I don't think that there's any other option though, if you don't want to go crazy.
I think it's true. And I think that it's partly like the expectations that you put on yourself, which are of course inspired by, you know, society and society's expectations for you, you know? So I think, yeah, I mean, I do think that there's a point of like having to kind of really reassess for yourself, okay, what is, and I think people say, okay, what is success to you? What is, you know, monetary success? What is emotional success, relationship success, etc. I think that on the one hand, people do need to define themselves for that. But I think at the same time, it's like, well, I mean, I know to a degree what it's like, because, you know, if I'm not performing in stages, then I don't feel that I'm living out to my full potential, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I say that to kind of bring it back to like, I've absolutely 1000% have had the conversation with myself and with my husband, like, is it time? Like, do I need to stop? Like, do I need to, you know, maybe shift gears here? You know, like, do I need to focus on something else? And I even had that very serious conversation with myself, like a couple weeks ago. Like, it was just one of those periods in my life where I was just like really down in it, like mentally. And I was like, I kind of like started to think about like what my life would be like without it and what I was going to do instead of. And I don't know, man, that little voice, there's just that little voice inside me. And I think it's inside a lot of artists who actually listen to themselves. And it's like, hey, you're meant to do this. Like, I don't know how the fuck it's going to work out. I don't know why. I don't know who, what, when, where. And it's probably not going to work on your timeline. In fact, my great grandmother had a saying, which was that God always walks with a cane. He might not get there quickly, but he always gets there, and he gets there on his own time. And not at all on your timeline. So,
oh, that's super real. That whole timeline thing. Also, I think the thing of redefining success, because what you said when you're talking about how you were rethinking whether you wanted to do this or not, of like, is this going to work out? Right. I think at least for myself, I've had such a set idea of what it looks like to work out. What does that look like? That looks like playing really big stages. That looks like doing this or doing that. And then I think now what I'm really finding for myself is I'm like, okay, what if working out means enjoying what I do? You know, like even if that doesn't mean being successful in the world, which I of course want to be very much, but what if it just means that I am doing the thing that I feel like I was made to do, and I'm doing it to the best of my ability as well as I possibly can? And what if that's working out? Like, that's a scary concept.
No, it is. I have some issue with the whole idea of like, what does success look like to you? Because to me, sometimes it also then makes me feel kind of guilty for having such big dreams, or naive even for having such big dreams, right? Because on the one hand, you know, I'm like, okay, yes, like I think that there are steps, you know, in terms of like, okay, let's realistically get to this goal to then get to that goal, to that goal, to that goal, right? So for right now, let's focus on the bottom of the mountain because we know we want to get to the top, kind of thing. And I think that there's absolutely some merit to that. At the same time, I think there's also kind of sometimes an undercurrent of like shame of like, well, you shouldn't be really trying to perform for stadiums and have dreams as big as Queen. Like, come on. Ain't nobody does do that. It's like 0.000%. And I'm like thinking to myself, well, yeah, but like, I can't take that out of me. Like, I'm sorry, but like, that's what I ultimately want. And I do not feel that I will be as happy doing a different type of performing. Like for me, it's like, no, that's the dream. Like that's what I want to go for. And if I can't get that, I don't quite know yet what happiness is going to look like for me. Like, I'll be honest, you know? And I think that that's sort of a conversation that I'm still sort of having with myself. And I think also too, there's something kind of, again, like the other side of the coin for me with this talk in terms of like, oh, you know, are your dreams too big or whatever, right? Beyonce actually said something to the effect of, people are often afraid of their own greatness and of their own potential. And so they start to kind of like limit themselves and shut things down, shut the doors to possibilities before they even have a chance to open them. And I don't want to do that to myself either, you know, because it's like, okay, if I've had this voice inside of me for years and years and I've tried to reevaluate it, I've tried to tame it, I've tried to be like, okay, maybe it should be like a little bit lower, a little bit realistic. And if I still have that, then like maybe I'm meant to have it. And maybe it's not going to work out in the way that I'm envisioning, but like if I still have that voice and it's still saying basically the same thing, maybe there's something to it. You know what I mean?
That it's interesting that you say that. So I have definitely been on the journey for myself of trying to understand what does it look like to be happy, because I know for myself, like I've always had big dreams from the beginning. I was like, I'm gonna be a fucking star. And no,
yeah, bitch, you were on American Idol. Of course you did, bitch.
Well, I've always had that. But what was interesting is what I was noticing was happening was having that expectation of this is going to happen in this way was taking away my joy in the process. And so I was talking to my roommate about this, and she had some really good points. She's an actress, and she's been on a lot of different like network television shows, but she hasn't gotten a series regular yet, but she's always wanted. And she was like, for both of us, this is a lottery. And how she described it, which I really related to, was we can absolutely and should absolutely have those big dreams and work towards that. But like, if we allow our happiness to be dependent on whether we get those dreams or not, there is a good possibility that even if we were to get them, there could still be that like unhappiness there if it do, and if that doesn't fill it, then what will? So I think for me personally, and this might not be the solution for everyone, but I've really been trying to work on what it looks like to just be really grounded and happy with what I have, while at the same time balancing the really high ambitions and dreams that I have and keeping those and saying like, I do want this. I have no idea what it's going to look like or how I'm going to get it, but I am also able to be content and happy in the process. And that's still very much a journey as well. You know, that's a really hard balancing act to strike, but I'm miserable otherwise. So
no, and that's fair. And I think also too, it's important to derive happiness from things other than your career, right? Like whether it's from other people or other hobbies, other passions, whatever, you know, like, and to your point, I do think that having a sense, at least sort of a foundation of gratitude is a good kind of, it does literally, it keeps you grounded, but then it also is a good kind of like jumping off point for when you do get to higher levels of success, right?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
For me, I'm very, very blessed that I have such an amazing relationship with my husband. Like he has always been supportive. He's always been like literally, now granted, he's an actor and a producer, so he's in the industry in that sense, so he gets it. Yeah. But at the same time, like I remember when we first started dating, I literally said to him like right up front, I was like, so there's another man in this relationship and it's my career. Yeah. And you need to accept that from day one. He was like, sounds good. Like, and he's been that way ever since, you know, it's always been like, okay, like this is a part of you. This is like an integral part of what makes you is, you know, this drive and this career and this dream and the music and all that. So it's like, okay, how do we foster that? What do we got to do? So I'm very blessed that I have that support system. You know, my family's always been very supportive of my musical endeavors as well. Like luckily I did not come from a family who was like, go be a doctor because money. Like I luckily did not have that. I was always very blessed with that. I do though I struggle a lot with the guilt of naivete, if that makes sense, of like, I want to have it all. Like I really think I could, and I want to, but I also feel very ashamed because for me, it'd be like striking the lottery twice, right? Like I struck the lottery with finding Dave and with being with him for nearly 10 years. Like I struck the lottery with that. Like not a lot of people find that in their lives. Yeah. So is it selfish of me to then want to strike the lottery twice, if you will.
I feel the same way with my boyfriend. I'm like,
Right.
wait a minute. This is like the perfect man.
Right.
Can I really have a good career?
Right, exactly. You're like, you know, is it, can I have both? I don't know. And then I look at my mom, who's like, you know, my hero, and I look at her life that she had, if you will, in terms of like, she was able to have both. She had a career and she had a family, right? Like she, awesome. Yeah, but she was able to do that because of the support system that she had. Like my Nana, her mom, like literally helped raise us, you know, like, and my dad was there too, but it was like her mother stepping in to like, you know, pick us up from school, take us to soccer practice while she had to work or while she, you know, had to be traveling. So she was able to have fulfillment in both sides of her life. And so I've seen it happen, which is why I'm like, well, damn it, I want it too. And obviously, like, she had a completely different career. She was in, you know, marketing and advertising. So completely different type of career where there was like a ladder, if you will. But at the same time, she also then started her own business with 3 kids under the age of 6. Like, and it became a very successful business. Yeah. Oh yeah, it was great. Like she literally, she made it like $1 million business, which is fucking awesome. So I'm like, that's okay, awesome. I've seen you. Yeah. So I've seen you have both. Well, why can't I have both? And so like, I kind of struggle with it. I struggle with it a lot. So on the one hand, I'm like, how silly am I to want both? At the same time, I'm like, well, I see my mom do it. Like, so.
Yeah, you know what? And I think that like happiness and success, it evolves over time, right? Like I know for myself, like for a long time, I was like, I don't want to be in a relationship because men suck. And then, and then that started changing. And I was like, oh wait, I do actually want to be in a relationship. And now I'm in one. And I'm like, oh my God, this man's amazing. And then like for a long time, I was like, I want to be on the road all the time. And I was like, well, what it would look like to be on the road a little bit and then like do all these other things. And so I think for me, I'm trying to hold my definition of success with loose hands and like see the areas in which I'm successful in now, while at the same time continually striving, honestly, mostly just to fulfill the potential that I believe that I have. You know, it's like,
I feel that.
I definitely want to make sure that I'm always in control of my happiness. I try not to allow my happiness to be dictated by things outside of my control, because a lot of times I've been very unhappy. But I'm also like, man, I feel like I have so much within myself to give to a lot of people. So like, how do I continue that journey of just trying to fulfill my potential while still being grateful and happy, while still being ambitious, while blah, 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 you know, and it's just like all these different things. But I think that the fact that we know it's a balancing act, that we're always kind of like, you know, adjusting those scales, I think that's all we can do, you know?
I like the loose hand analogy. I think that's actually really good, because it's sort of like, you got a grip on it, but it's not, you know, it's not like ironclad, and that this is exactly how it must work.
Because it never works out that way. Ever.
No. You know, tell God your plans if you want to make them laugh. You know, that kind of
seriously.
thing.
Oh my God. But I do have to believe, at least I'm kind of not forcing myself, but I'm encouraging myself to believe that the universe's plan is better than mine. I have to believe it, because I do know that like, when I was younger and I wanted to be playing those stadiums so early, if I had reached that level of success, I would have lost it all, because I was not mentally capable of having a sustained career. Personally, I was not emotionally able to do that. And so the fact that I haven't reached that yet, I'm so grateful. And I'm like, okay, then hopefully this is in my future, but there's obviously something looking out for me that knew that if I had that, I would have had a pretty quick and probably very public downfall. And that would have really sucked.
Right. Right. No. And it's like, you know, you're looking at the stories of like, you know, these like Disney Channel stars from like 15 years ago. And now you look at them now, and some of them are not even here, like on this planet kind of a thing, you know? And like, that's a crazy thing too. And I look at like Demi Lovato. I fucking love her. I love her voice. I think she's awesome. And you look at the career that she's had from like, what, 14, right?
She was on Disney at like 6 or something crazy like that.
It's like
or on Barney, I think. Yeah,
and it's like you're going through puberty in the public eye, you're dating in the public eye for the first time. It's like you're going through all these pressures, like literally for the first time in the public eye, while trying to have a career because you enjoy singing. And it's like, it destroys them. And like I would have been destroyed. And I thought to myself, I remember writing a song in my notebook, or I never wrote in the notebook. Literally, I have all my songs on my phone. Wrote it on the notes on my phone. I was 22 and I was like, oh my God, I feel so old. And it's because I thought that I needed to have started at like 13 or 15.
Yeah.
You know, I was like,
oh, someone who started at 15.
Right.
Still doesn't matter.
Right. Exactly. I was like, oh my God, like I'm fucked because I didn't get started at, you know, like 13, 14. And now I'm like, oh Jesus, thank God I didn't. Like, I would have died. I would have died.
Yeah.
Like not
100%,
at all.
bro. That's just wild. The industry is a scary place when you're a young person. And it makes you grow up really, really quickly. I'm very grateful that, like, I experienced a lot of negative things in it, but I am really grateful that I never got to that level and that age. I don't know how Debbie is still here. Like, I think it's a miracle that, you know, when she OD'd, she got brought back. Like, and there's so many artists like that.
Yeah, dude.
I'm just like, dude, that's fucking wild. But anyway.
Yeah, dude.
Anyway, so well, we're coming kind of to the close of the podcast here, but I did want to ask one last question.
Yeah.
Now that we've talked about all this, about carving our own paths, and especially bringing it back to how this concert is kind of our way of doing that, of like really, you know, creating an experience for ourselves and for our audience that's not dictated by what anyone else has to say or do. It is what we want. What do you want people to experience when they come to this show and see all of these amazing artists?
I want them to see and to experience camaraderie and like something that was put together in a professional manner, but truly like from the heart, if that makes sense. Because like this was very much grassroots. This was very much, you know, like to determine young women putting their heads together, being like, all right, what can we do to, you know, figure this shit out for ourselves? What can we do differently? And I want them to see like, wow, this is what can happen when you bear down and you grit it out and you hope for the best and you work with the right people. I want them to see that. I also want them to see, you know, like, hey, like this is what can happen when we shine the spotlight on women in rock music. You know, I think like, hey, this is what can happen when we have a female DJ, a female comedian. And it's not like, okay, cool, like we're getting women in there. Like, no, like let's celebrate like what it means to be a woman in this industry and what it means to be a woman you know, in a genre particularly that isn't always what's the word? The most welcoming to women, right? Like you kind of have to prove yourselves tenfold, you know? So like what would it look like if we actually had an event that was completely centered around, you know, breaking that entire stereotype of like, you gotta be a certain way. I gotta be, because I mean, look at the women on our lineup. Like we all look and sound extremely different. Yeah. Right. Like definitely. You know, and it's like, okay, well, this is what rock can look like from these different angles. And I think also too, quite frankly, I want them to see like, hey, look away from your phone screen and look in your own fucking back door. Yeah. Like, look at what LA has. Look at the women that are.
And the quality. Quality female musicians and artists.
Yeah.
That's an important part of that.
I know. I want them to see, because I think that's the other thing too, like, women in rock and women in general, they're always like, oh, are you the singer? Like, oh, are you the this? No, like we have the raw power, we have the talent to back it up, and we have the acumen to back it up too. And I want them to see like, hey, look at what LA has to offer apart from the, you know, viral TikTok video, apart from the 100,000, 200,000 followers on Instagram. Okay. Like look back into what it was like to discover an artist for the first time when you saw them live, not when you saw them scrolling through your feed after scrolling through advertisements and, you know, stupid memes and whatever. Yeah. Like, what was it like to truly discover something great? And I'm not, cause like we all go to live shows and we all go to open mics and jams, and a lot of it can be mediocre because of the oversaturation of talent. But what would it be like if the talent was curated and it was raw and undiscovered and real, and it was like, hey, look what's in your back door, look what's in your backyard, these 4 badass women, oh, you didn't know about them, now you do. Like, I want to be a platform, I want us to be a platform for women who haven't quite been able to break through because they didn't figure out the algorithm yet. And I don't think that should be a reason for people not being able to succeed. So let's create a stage, a platform for these women to be like, hey, let me show you my talent. That's why we have industry people coming. Like, we wanted to say, hey, here's another way. That, remember in the good old days, you actually would go to shows and get up off your ass and go see new artists. Like, let's bring that back, and let's bring it back for women in LA in this generation.
Fucking love it. Fucking love it. Well, with that, everyone who's listening to this, make sure you come to our show on Friday, July 19th, starting at 8 p.m. at Lucky Strike. The RSVP link is in the description. Jules, I'm so excited to do this show with you. I'm excited to do it with all of our artists. I think it's going to be a fucking amazing time. We're going to have such a fun time. Woo! And we'll go ahead and start getting, I'm like, this is the look I'm going to be wearing for the show. So I'm like, fucking
this
ready
is not.
Everyone, thank you so much for listening, and we are going to see you on July 19th, and catch us on the next episode.
Woo!
Bye!